I've been watching some of Dr. John Campbell's videos recently. You probably know the gentleman I'm talking about. He's been on YouTube for some while following the COVID situation and the vaccines and stuff, commenting on studies and asking questions. I understand that he's a retired nurse teacher and an A&E nurse. He knows his stuff. Anyway, he's just put out a video recently, and I've put the link in the description. You'll be fascinated on this one because he's been looking at a study from Cleveland in Ohio. And it says that in amongst 50,000 employees, the more vaccines that were given, the more chances that those people were getting infections of COVID-19, which does seem a little odd, if you ask me. The more vaccines they were giving, the more chances of infections they were getting. It's well worth having a look. There's a chart that he put up, it's in my thumbnail, which shows exactly how that works. It does seem a bit weird. Now, if this is true, as John Campbell does explain himself, he's sure that other medical professionals will be very fascinated to see if they can replicate this or look at the data themselves across the world, because this could be a massive thing about whether we continue giving people a vaccination, particularly that one for this disease. He goes on, he's got some information here about, and I'll just paraphrase it because I recommend you looking at his papers himself. If you have one dose of the vaccine compared to people who are not vaccinated at all, you are in fact 1.7 times, just over 1.5 times more likely to be able to have an infection of the COVID virus, which does seem a bit strange. Mind you, of course, they used to say, well, you need 2 doses, don't you, to get the ballpark going. However, if you have those 2 doses, according to this study, you are more likely to just over 2.5 times. It's 2.63, in fact, is the figure. Just over 2.5 times more likely to be infected than if you weren't vaccinated at all, which is a bit odd. But it gets worse, apparently, because if you then follow that up with the booster, which is what everybody's being recommended, it's 3 times more likely to be infected, which is a little strange. And then if you have another one, as of course they're encouraging us to have loads of these boosters, if you have 4 injections of the vaccine, you are just under 4 times more likely to get the infection. That does turn everything on its head if it can be replicated, and this study looked at by other people who do these studies and look at the data and share this information. I'm sure that governments around the world, once this information is out, will be very nervous, won't they? Because a benevolent government that wants to look after its population and make sure that they're doing the best, that they are following the science, will look at this science and think, blimey, it looks like we've made a bit of a cock up here. We've been giving people something which hasn't actually helped them. Now, I seem to remember a bit of an interview or a question that was asked of an employee of Pfizer about whether the vaccine actually stopped you being able to pass the infection on. So even if you're likely to get infected yourself, heaven forbid that you actually pass it on to somebody else. And I remember hearing that the Pfizer executive there said, no, they hadn't tested that. They were so busy trying to run at the speed of science, whatever that means. And they just went out and stuck it in people's arms anyway, which is a little bit nerve-wracking, particularly now as we learn from the study in Ohio that actually you're becoming more likely to be infected. So why would you want something like that, particularly if you're out of the age range that is likely to be getting the infection anyway? So I assume the governments will be looking at this very seriously, particularly on top of the yellow card system that we have here in the UK, in which there's been just under 500,000 reports of harm or adverse effects from people who've had the vaccine. in this country. And that's, I think, a lot more than any other vaccine that we've had that's gone to market has had. I believe that equates to something like 1 in 800 people are liable to have some problem with it, which the odds of that don't seem great. So I don't know whether that would affect anybody's decision about having the vaccine and whether it's worth all the money that was spent on it. But as I said, of course, governments around the world will know exactly what to do. They'll have a very good reason why they've wanted us to have this and almost cajoled us into having it, and in some cases mandated it. Surely a benevolent government and medical profession and big pharma have all got our interests at heart, haven't they? And they'll have a very good reason why we've had to take this thing.